Hey, what's up? I am doing another Facebook Live morning coffee Twins Q&A session. I'm Derek Wetmore, 1500ESPN.com. I'll let people kind of gather in here or whatever. If you've got any Twins questions, please feel free to ask them. I'll answer those here. I will have to leave in a little bit to go do a radio hit with Phil Mackey and Judd Zulgad, so you can tune into that as well. But I wanted to get this video rolling here this morning before any of that stuff got started. I'll start with the big news, and then I'll open it up to your guys' questions and everything. But the Twins officially hiring Torii Hunter, Michael Cuddyer, and LaTroy Hawkins as special assistants to their front office. I'm going to let you gather in here a little bit. Check my little internet connectivity issues, but we should be okay now. If you leave your comments below, I'll answer them as they come in. We'll kind of get rolling here, and it's open to anything. If you got questions on the Torii Hunter, Michael Cuddyer, LaTroy Hawkins, I'd be happy to take those. Any questions that I can't get to as well, I'll try to get to everything here today, but we can either talk about it on the radio or I'll bring it up on today's Touch 'Em All podcast. Phil Mackey and I are going to be recording another episode this afternoon after he gets done with his radio show. We're recording the latest in our weekly Twins podcast. I don't know how many of you guys are on that, but if you like the Twins and you haven't listened to our podcast, you should check that out. It's pretty easy. You just go to iTunes. Touch 'Em All is the name of the podcast, and we talk Twins every week. So let's get started talking about some Twin stuff here, and then, like I said, you can just fill up the comment section. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'll start with the hiring, and I saw a lot of people on social media, on my Facebook page, on our station's Facebook page, 1500 ESPN. A lot of people were it was split. It was split into two camps, right? You were either really loved the move because these were popular players, I really like them and they're cool, or you were really cynical about the move, like classic Twins, classic country club thinking. They just want to hire everybody who used to play for them, give them a free job and a free paycheck in the organization. Now, I'm in the exact middle of those two, and I would say to either side, hold on, let's just let it play out. I will say that I don't think that there's a lot of downside, provided you limit their roles. I don't think that you're really going to see any, what's the harm, right? Other than spending some money. And some people are commenting on my Facebook page, which you can find, Derek Wetmore MLB, quick plug. Some people saying like, well, wasted money, spend that money on free agents. How much do you think they're spending on these three guys that it's going to impede them from spending in free agency? I think that if the Twins want to bump their payroll and they decide to do that, they should be able to. There's nothing that should be holding them back from spending a little bit more. If they deem that the market's not very good right now and that they just don't want to upgrade their team because they want to lose again some more this summer, that's a different conversation entirely. And we can praise or criticize that in a different conversation, and we can certainly talk about that today too. But it's not the same conversation. Hiring Michael Cuddyer does not prevent them from going out and getting a starting pitcher on the free agent market, or going to get a late inning reliever, or making a trade and taking on some kind of salary. These are different conversations that are on very different magnitudes of spending, in my opinion. I don't know what the exact paycheck is, but I know that spending on your front office shouldn't preclude you from spending on your major league product. So I just kind of like to separate those two conversations. And as someone who can kind of be a tad cynical at times, I would even look to these hires and say, oh, okay, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Ambassadors, sort of, I'll call them conduits or like liaisons between the front office and the field staff and the players and all that can be very valuable. If communication breaks down between any of those three arms, it's an uphill battle the rest of the way. So if these three guys help even 1% in that, I don't know how you could really be mad at that as a Twins fan. I will, I've got one quick question in here, and I'll start getting to more, but I want to read the job description of the three guys. Benjamin asks, are you against ugly Christmas sweaters? I don't know what you're talking about. I picked this out, and it's kind of, somebody told me that it's not quite ugly enough to be an ugly Christmas sweater to make it clear that, like, you're joking. And I said, what do you mean? I'm not joking. And they didn't know how to react to that, like putting them on their heels. Here are the job descriptions, and I'll start getting to some of the questions that you guys got. And thanks for joining here on the morning coffee Q&A session on the Twins. According to the Twins, here are the 3 job descriptions. I'm just going to read them straight off my computer screen. This is in the column that I posted on 1500ESPN.com about how their reunion recalls the days the team was good. Maybe I was a little mean in the headline. Michael Cuddyer will be responsible for helping position player development by focusing on transition programs and teaching an understanding of Major League expectations, environment, and culture. He'll also be involved in the amateur draft process and throughout the year as a resource for player acquisitions. That sounds like a pretty involved role, and to me it sounds like Cuddyer maybe wants to transition into being more of a front office type, not just a liaison, like having an actual job scouting and doing player evaluation and stuff like that. That's pretty interesting to me. I'd be curious to see how that plays out. I don't think you give him a lot of power in year 1, but as a tryout, as an audition, if this is like a high-profile internship, that's exactly what Major League teams should be trying to do. There's nobody limiting your spending in this. There's not a salary cap on player development and resources that you can put into player acquisition and try to make the smartest decision possible. So we'll see what Cuddyer, how his involvement maybe evolves over time, but at least as it starts, that sounds like a smart position to have in your front office. And, bonus points that he's a former Twin and a popular guy at that. LaTroy Hawkins says he'll be contributing to the development of organizational pitching philosophies used in the selection and development of all players. So the developing part is interesting of that. It wouldn't necessarily mean that they have something pegged down that is their organizational philosophy, that they're amenable. They will adapt potentially to what people are saying. What LaTroy Hawkins can maybe talk with pitchers about, well, what do you think? If this is our, if we take a Neil Allen philosophy, for example, that he brought over from the Tampa Bay Rays. Same-handed changeups. Right-handed pitcher throwing changeups to right-handed batters, lefties on lefties. If statistically that's a good play, but baseball conventional wisdom says, it'll never work because if your changeup cuts into a right-handed batter, that's going to go into the sweet spot of his bat. Yeah, but if maybe that's conventional wisdom, but if the numbers say nobody's hitting it, use it more. Implement that more. I'd be curious to see if LaTroy Hawkins' involvement brings about things like that. I mean, that's what you're searching for, right? You're searching for things that maybe you think and you've been trained to believe in baseball. Like, here's another cliche: all lefties are low ball hitters. Man, how many times do you hear that on broadcasts throughout the year, locally and nationally? Well, those left-handed hitters, their sweet spot's just down and in, and if you groove the ball in there, they're going to hit it out of the park. Maybe that's true, but do the numbers back it up? I don't know. Go figure that out, and that's part of the development process of what you'd be teaching your pitchers. If that's not true, and then you've got a lefty with a big fastball, Tyler J. or somebody like that, teach them to start pounding that spot. Figure out whatever you can to exploit weaknesses in opposing hitters. Work through the stats, work through scouting, and figure out what works well for your pitchers. And I think that's the goal, right? That's what everybody's trying to do. So if LaTroy Hawkins helps in that, again, I'm not cynical about the hiring. I don't see how it can be a bad thing if he's going to help in that regard. Now, if it turns out that he's not helpful, okay, fine. You gave it a try, you gave it a shot, and it was worth looking into. But it's not like, as I mentioned on Twitter, it's not like you're going to put Torii Hunter in charge of the June draft. If you put Torii Hunter at the top, in your war room at the top of your draft pecking order and said, all right, rounds 1 through 10, what do you got? Well, obviously that's going to hurt your organization. He just doesn't have the background in scouting. He doesn't have the information that other people who do that as a full-time job year-round would have. So I think where the cynicism maybe creeps in is when people say, underqualified for this kind of job. I don't agree with that. I think I think all three of these guys are highly qualified to be in some role, in some capacity, and the Twins are just getting that started. They're getting the ball rolling on figuring that out. Quickly, we'll get to Torii Hunter's job description, and then I see some questions starting to roll in here, so we'll get to that. Torii Hunter is going to be involved. Here's the quote from their press release. Emphasizing heavy focus on organizational culture and major league environment. I read that, and I think he will be in charge of throwing dance parties after they win at Target Field. That's what I think. I don't know. Then he'll also be spending time with a major league team and baseball operations decision-making staff. Torii also might be interested in getting into more of a front office role than just sort of a liaison role. I don't know this. We'll see how it plays out over time, but maybe this is just the ground floor of each of these three positions. Hunter will also be involved in the amateur draft process, scouting, minor league, and trade deadline preparation. Again, probably a voice in the room. I don't think he's the final authority, and if he is, I'll be very surprised. And I would expect, my instinct says he would be underqualified for that job. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe in time he grows into that. But I think if you're being cynical about these hires, it means that you're overestimating how much the Twins are going to rely on these three guys. I think they're a voice. I think it's an important voice to have in the room that the Twins are adding with these three hires. So, anyways, that's my quick take. I did write a column about it on 1500ESPN.com that you can go find. Let us get to some questions as they're rolling in, and let me get to some more coffee. Darren says the Polans are stopping them spending on players. And then he says not at all. I don't know what the not at all is in response to, Darren, but quickly I think anytime, I could be wrong here, but anytime someone uses the ownership group as a red herring, I think you're making excuses for a front office staff that has not performed to expectations over the past, call it 7 years, 8 years, whatever it is. Some bad signings, some bad trades, really put the Twins in a hard spot. But, they're a mid-market team. If you're going to use payroll as an excuse, I think that's a lazy argument. Sorry, Darren, if that offends you, but you speak for a lot of people when you say that. You wouldn't believe how many people are ripping the poll ads as if that's the reason that the Twins have not been competitive for the past 6 seasons. Frankly, it's a red herring, and by just saying the poll ads can never win. So until the Twins change ownership group, they'll be stuck. They'll be sunk, stuck in the mud. I think that just gets you out of actually analyzing the moves. I think that gets you away from it, gives you a get out of jail free card of actually having to analyze the baseball that's going on and figuring out, well, what's wrong? How could they fix it? How could they improve it? Could they spend more money? Yes. Would that be helpful? Sure it would, and they probably should. But to use that as a blanket excuse to say that the Twins will just never be good as long as Jim Polad's, the CEO. Stop with that. We can talk about that. It's certainly part of the equation. But it dominates the conversation a little bit more than it really should. You see it in comment threads all the time. So I just wanted to address anybody who feels that way about it. If you disagree, send me a note. Comment here and tell me why I'm wrong. MG Stein says 100% need to move Dozier for prospects. He isn't here when team competes next. Yeah, I think that's true. I don't think you 100% need to move him. I don't think you need to say, trade Dozier now for nothing, doesn't matter, whatever anyone's offering, just take the highest bidder. But I think that Dozier's a great and really interesting trade chip right now because, like you said, when are the Twins next going to be World Series contenders? If it's not 2017 and that's your ultimate aspiration to be a World Series contender, then it probably makes sense to either package Dozier or send him out of town in just on his own in a trade package to try and bring back some pitching. That's probably what you'd target, right? Young pitching. Try to rebuild the starting staff. I've had a lot of people ask me what specific players you'd go after. I don't think you limit yourself like that. I think you go find an organization that needs power or an organization that needs second base and figure out what kind of pitching they have to offer in trades. Or get tricky. Multi-team offers. There are some teams that have pitching prospects and are looking to upgrade somewhere, but not necessarily second base, but that you could then involve a third team. And the Twins are spending a lot more time figuring that out, I'm sure, than I am right now. But so I agree with you that you could trade him because he's when the team's maybe competitive again, he's going to be, 32, 33? Probably hits free agency at that point anyway, because I don't think you're going to extend him right now with 2 years and $15 million left on his deal. But that's one of the things that makes him valuable too. 2 years, $15 million for a power hitter who hit 42 last year. That's an interesting carrot to dangle in trade talks. Let's get to some more because I've got a radio appearance coming up here shortly that I'll have to get to. If you want more Twins, tune into that. 1500 ESPN at either 11:30 or 11:45. I'm not quite sure yet. I'll have to check. But I'm going on the radio sometime soon here, within the hour. The Polans, Bill says the Polans need to leave the Twins' new administration alone. Anytime I see a misspelling of the name Polads, I think that it's a bit, so apologize if it's not, and it's people honestly just ripping on the ownership group and misspelling their name at the same time. But I addressed that in the last question, Bill, so same deal there. Bill also has another question. Keep Dozier and get rid of Meyer. Probably Mauer, I'm guessing. Well, we talked about that a lot on the last week's Facebook Live video. I think that's a ridiculous assertion. You could keep Dozier. That part's not ridiculous. But cutting Mauer, come on. He's got 2 years and $46 million left on your deal, and you want to eat that money just so that you can get him off the roster? I think that the Mauer conversation has really jumped the shark. If he were making $3 million, obviously we wouldn't be talking about it. So the contract's the biggest thing. I get that, and that's going to continue to hamstring the Twins through the 2018 season when he's under contract. But the Mauer hate is so disproportionate to what he's actually doing to the Twins. I mean, there are two people who are getting blamed right now for the Twins being bad. The Polad ownership group and Joe Mauer. Both of those, I think, are lazy arguments that avoid actually getting into the other decisions that are made. Those are sunk costs. Joe Mauer's contract, there's nothing that you can do about it. So if you want to analyze the margins and figure out how the Twins can get better around Joe Mauer so that can stop being a talking point, that's hard to do. That's hard work, but that's the fun stuff. So let's focus more on that than paying attention to this albatross of a contract that you can't do anything about. Every time someone asks me if they can cut or trade Mauer, I say, no, you can't cut him because you're paying him anyways, and you can't trade him because he has a full no-trade clause. That's where the discussion ends for me. Figure out the rest of the team around him. Let's talk about that stuff. If you meant Alex Meyer and not Joe Mauer, I apologize. And if that's the case, they traded Alex Meyer at the last trade deadline in the Ricky Nolasco deal for Hector Santiago. What's our 40-man roster going to look like? Ann Jansen with a good question. It's not set, but it's getting there. The Twins made some decisions. The Trevor Plouffe one was the most interesting to me. Also keep in mind, they cut Trevor Plouffe before that 40-man deadline, but they kept guys like Hector Santiago. They kept Eduardo Escobar, guys that I think could potentially be overpaid next year, but I think it's an indication of guys that are going to take into spring training and maybe hope to make the roster. Eduardo Escobar, to me, showed promise at one point, and now he's kind of, you hate to say it, in just one season, but he had a bad year last year. I don't think he's a starting caliber player. The doubles power is great. You'll take that, and it's a nice bench bat. I'm not going to argue that, but just was never consistent enough at shortstop. Can't really play anywhere else that makes his bat valuable enough. Some people say the power is fluky. I don't know. He's put up some power numbers in a lot of different stretches when he's been given an opportunity, but I don't really see him developing into an everyday shortstop in 2016. So anyways, there'll be a couple $1 million as a bench bat, similar to what you did with Eduardo Nunez last year. You just kind of go into the year with him. And in Eduardo Nunez's case, it worked out perfectly for the Twins. He caught fire. He made the All-Star game, for crying out loud. And then they traded him to the Giants at the deadline for Baseball America top 100 prospect in Adalberto Mejia. Lefty, chance to make the starting rotation. I'd say outside chance. I don't think he probably breaks camp in the starting rotation, but if he's in AAA or if he's a helpful piece in the bullpen or something like that, good. You just added a piece for somebody that you probably weren't going to get very much out of going forward, Eduardo Nunez. I don't think Rob Antony gets a ton of credit for that trade, but I think that was a solid trade for the Twins, and I think overall Antony did a really solid job at the trade deadline. He acquitted himself well in the short term. So what's the 40-man going to look like, Ian? Good question. We'll find out more maybe at the winter meetings next week, and we'll obviously find out more as spring training approaches. But I'm going to the winter meetings, actually, so you can follow my coverage at Derek Wetmore on Twitter or Derek Wetmore MLB on Facebook. I'm happy to answer your questions there. It's going to be a fun couple of days, probably a very busy couple of days, assuming that it goes down as expected. Let's see. Yep, Bill Mauer. Yep, okay, I got it. Thanks. Sorry, I know spell check gets you on Mauer. I've had to add Mauer to my phone, and when I was covering the Orioles, I had to add Wieters to my phone because my spell check kept killing me on that one. So I knew what you meant, Bill. I got you. Let's see, what else? Thank you for the question, Bill, by the way. I appreciate you dropping by. Brent asks, what's your position on Dozier? If he could get traded, should they only look for pitching? It's a good question because that's what you're seeing the most, right? People suggest if you're trading Dozier, trade him for pitching. It's because that's what the Twins need the most, and it's what it's their most valuable trade chip, in my opinion. My position on Dozier. Well, I'm working on a column, actually, and I don't really have a position on Dozier. That's maybe a cop-out answer, so forgive me for that, but he's a good player on a good contract who could help the Twins win more games in 2017. That's my position on Dozier. If your goal isn't to win more games in 2017, it could make a lot of sense to trade that team-friendly contract and all the power at second base to go upgrade it in other spots. You name pitching. That's a great spot to go target. But the people that say that you have to trade him now just because his value's maybe peaked, I don't disagree with that. I mean, a 6-win player after a terrible 2-month stretch to start the season is a really, really quality lineup cog. I mean, he would have been in the MVP conversation if he hadn't had the first 2 terrible months, and he probably wouldn't have won it. Obviously, the Twins are bad, and people still take that into account. But like Brian Dozier was the very best player on a very bad team. So you start to see guys like that, and when they're on team-friendly deals, a lot of times those guys can get traded. Brent, in a nutshell, my position is if you can get some value for him, you should be trading him. But I don't think you should necessarily just, if someone gives you a young pitcher, you should jump at that and just say, okay, sold, done. Like they did last year with Aaron Hicks. I thought it made a lot of sense to try to sell high. Now, they traded him for John Ryan Murphy, and maybe they picked the wrong guy. The thought process, though, was sound, and I just don't think it's the same with Brian Dozier. Brian Dozier is a much better player than Aaron Hicks. He'll contribute more in 2017. So my position is one of right down the middle. You shouldn't hang up the phone when people want to talk trade, but you shouldn't be texting everybody saying, hey, please take him, please take him. I think that you got to fall somewhere in the middle. Try and get value if you can, and if you can't, roll into 2017 with him as your starting second baseman and one of your best players. So let's see. Brent's got another question. We'll get to that. And thank you guys for dropping the questions. Make these videos fun. I'll post this to the 1500 ESPN Facebook page. I'll also share it on mine. If you're not following my account on Facebook, do that. We have Twins Conversations basically going all week long. You can find me at Derek Wetmore MLB on Facebook. Brent asks, is Perkins your closer at this point, or should they start looking elsewhere? Well, I said last year, as much as I like Perkins and as much as when he's healthy he's been a dominant reliever, I think you've got to have a backup plan. Last year their backup plan was Kevin Jepsen, and that was a terrible idea, and it wound up being even worse than I expected it to be. They should have other backup plan options, but with that being said, I expect Perkins to be healthy in spring training and be the opening day closer. Even the best laid plans can go awry, so I think they should have something as a fill-in. I don't know that we're going to see the dominant Perkins ever again. That's sort of a sad reality that the Twins and Perkins are facing right now. This is a major labrum surgery that he had, and who knows how he's going to bounce back from it. Will the 96-mile-an-hour fastball come back? Will that wipeout slider come back that he can play off the fastball so well? That's when he's dominant. Throwing strikes, missing bats, striking batters out, and really controlling the end of games and shutting it down. Will we see that guy again? Who's to say? I have no idea. I would be just guessing at this point. His health has been problematic the past few years, and so the Twins probably have to have a backup plan. But you asked kind of two questions there, Brenton. Is Perkins your opening day closer, or your closer, you said? I think that's two different questions. Is he opening day? Is he your September closer? And then lastly, you say, should they start looking elsewhere? I think the answer is both. I think you go in with Perkins as your closer and try to build a good bullpen around him. If he stands up, if he stays healthy, and he goes back to being the great Glenn Perkins that you've known in the past, awesome. You've just built a better bullpen for yourself around Glenn Perkins. And if he's not, at least you have a better fallback option than what you did in 2016 when it blew up in your face with Kevin Jepsen just being just awful, costing them games the first 2 months. They finally DFA'd him. That was too bad because Jepsen's better than what he showed in 2016, and he was phenomenal down the stretch in 2015 after the trade. At the time, it was looking like a really smart trade, and now you're looking at a guy you DFA'd and gave up a top pitching prospect in Chih-Wei Hu for probably rather have Hu right now, obviously, but yeah, so I think the answer is both. I think you want to have a backup plan, but I think there's no reason to rule out Perkins 100% and say he can never pitch again, he'll never be a top level reliever. That's maybe doomsday, but sometimes you got to prepare for doomsday. In this case, the Twins probably should be. Scott says, I think the Pohlads left Ryan alone, and that was the problem. Maybe they needed to be more involved. I don't know. I go back and forth. Do you want to have an owner that's actively engaged and wants to win? Yeah, for sure. But, like, I don't know. How are the Dallas Mavericks doing right now? I love Mark Cuban as a franchise owner. It's not always the answer. It's a nuanced question. It's hard to say. In Major League Baseball especially, like, how much do you really want, is Magic Johnson's group actively involved in what the Dodgers are doing? I think it's smart that the Dodgers have sort of created their think tank and have a great, smartly run front office over there. But I don't know that you want ownership meddling too much, other than saying, hey, we want to win a World Series. What are the best ways we could do that? That's what I want the ownership group to do if I'm a fan of a team. I don't know that. Terry Ryan. I know that what the popular opinion is about him and all that stuff. I don't know that you can point to one person and say this was the problem. Whether it's Jim Pohlad, whether it's Terry Ryan, Bill Smith, whatever, whoever you want to point a finger at. Joe Mauer, he's a popular one to point fingers at. I just think that it's probably a more nuanced conversation than that. More questions rolling in. 1500 ESPN Twin Cities. Okay, so one of my coworkers or somebody hacked the account and has the password for this. Somebody says, is Jason Castro pitch framing value an argument as much of a stretch as it seems? No, not really. I mean, I've written about the move. I wrote a column on 1500ESPN.com if you want to go check that out. Coworkers, you should be reading that. Come on, man. I basically wrote, you're seeing a lot of people talking about pitch framing, and it probably does save runs over the course of a season. But if he's a one-win player that you're paying $8 million to for 3 years, and he helps the pitching staff, fine. It's not a huge splashy move. I've written in the past, I'm on the record as saying I think Wilson Ramos was a more attractive catcher to go pursue if you were trying to win right away let's say 2018, because who knows when Ramos is first going to catch in 2017, coming off that ACL surgery. The bat's way more exciting, obviously. Jason Castro is going to be a step down offensively from Kurt Suzuki, but he's about league average in throwing out runners, so that's a step up from Kurt Suzuki, and as you've noticed, he's getting a lot of acclaim for his excellent pitch framing. Don't go so far as to say, like, someone's a good pitch framer, so they're an MVP candidate. Nobody's saying that. But his pitch framing does reclaim some of the value lost in the fact that he's not a good offensive player and that he's not, like, especially spectacular in throwing out runners. I think Jason Castro is a fine addition. What I basically wrote in my column, if you didn't read it and you just want the quick summary, is like, it's nothing to get excited about, but also you shouldn't be looking to burn down the house with your pitchforks and what do they call those, torches? I don't know. Who still carries torches and pitchforks anymore? Anyways, I get it. I think I could see either side of the argument, right? If you don't like the signing, okay, I get why, but also don't ignore the fact that he does add value, and just because we can't quantify it perfectly and you think that the nerds are ruining baseball, I count myself in the nerd group, by the way, and yet I'm a skeptic of some of these things, the added value that they have. Anyways, the long story short is like, no, it's not a stretch as much as some people think it is, but also it's not like Jason Castro is going to come in and be the Twins MVP because he can steal a strike by catching it right here and presenting it right here and having Hunter Wendelstedt behind him get tricked into thinking that was a strike. It's part of the game. I'm not trying to argue that presentation to an umpire doesn't matter for a catcher. So don't ignore the value entirely. But the Twins aren't going to jump from 103 losses to 60 losses because now they're catching strikes on the fringe of the strike zone. It makes a difference, but just understand the level of difference that it's going to make. Okay, probably got time for a couple more, but I got to get up to the radio, and I got to catch my breath here, too. This has been fun. We do this every Tuesday. If you are interested in Twins Talk, just like 1500 ESPN's Facebook page. It's probably the easiest way to do it. You'll get your notification each week that we're doing a morning coffee session, Twins Q&A session. Tom Holt asks, Rosario, Buxton, and Kepler, is this the outfield to start next year with? Yeah, maybe. I think you definitely want to see Buxton start in center and Kepler start in right or left. I guess you pick which corner you want him in. Rosario, I've got my questions about. I've written about him extensively in the past. In fact, I wrote, he's the only player that I've profiled the 2016 season of because his ended prematurely. Questionable future starter for me. Potential future starter and future impact player, especially if he can combine a better offensive approach with the defense that we saw in his rookie season. Potential impact starting player. Also, if he slides going the wrong way, potential fourth outfielder. Excuse me. I think there's a spectrum that Rosario could fall in. I'm not really sure where that is yet. Could you sign a veteran outfielder to kind of hold down the fort in case one of those corner guys or Buxton doesn't pan out? Yeah, sure. You could. But I don't think you're going to contend for the postseason in 2017, so you got to figure out what you have. If I was the Twins, I think that I'd want to give Byron Buxton 700 plate appearances. I think I'd want Kepler to get 650 plate appearances, and I think I'd want Rosario to get 600 plate appearances. If another outfielder pops up and surprises you, fine. Adapt along the way, figure it out. But I think you want to figure out which of those guys is a starter, which is an impact player. What is Rosario? What's he going to give you? Can Kepler sustain and improve on his level of play from his rookie season, which was impressive, by the way? And can Buxton do what he did in September? And if he can, you're talking about a potentially dominant player on your hands at the very young age that Byron Buxton is. So, I mean, if I was a Twins fan, I'd be excited about the potential of that young outfield, defensively and offensively. I think that's a good place to start. And I think it's a really good place to start for the Twins that Miguel Sano probably won't be getting very many innings out there in the outfield. So we'll see. Could they sign a veteran guy? Yeah. They're not really anybody that I would look at and say they need to go sign this veteran outfielder. I could see it. It could make some sense. Or you could swing a trade kind of a thing. But I'd also kind of like, if I was the Twins, to just clear some plate appearances and some defensive innings for those three guys. It's a good question. Thanks for asking, Tom. Jason asks, what position does it make sense to bring in a veteran? Pitcher really hadn't panned out later. Corner outfielder? Yeah, Jason, kind of addressed corner outfield there before I saw your question. It's a good question. Yeah, pitching makes some sense. I think you could address the starting rotation if you really wanted to. Jeremy Hellickson's off the market, as we talked about last year. Maybe you don't want to spend the money. I saw Edinson Volquez is off the market. Maybe you don't want to spend on an Ivan Nova kind of guy. He's not that exciting. His stretch in Pittsburgh is interesting. Certainly teams are going to be looking into him for that. But do you want to go a multi-year deal with a guy like that? Nah, not necessarily. Could you keep an Irvin Santana, let him lead your rotation, and then move him at the July trade deadline? Yeah. Yeah, you could, and then open up a spot for some younger pitchers. I think that's maybe the way I'd go, but we'll see. It's going to depend on where they are on the win curve. If they're competitive in July, there's no reason to say they couldn't be buyers at this year's deadline. I just kind of expect that they'll be sellers based on their roster right now and based on the rest of the Central. So we'll see. Where would you sign a veteran? I don't know that you desperately need to sign a veteran anywhere, but I'd probably address the pitching staff. Benjamin asks, do you tender Santiago? Good question. I don't know. Pitching is expensive, and I think Santiago's better than what he was with the Twins. But with that being said, do you want to spend that kind of money, or do you want to save it and spend elsewhere? I think that's the question. Is if you're spending elsewhere, maybe you want to free up that cash. But you just freed up the Trevor Plouffe cash, so you probably got some money to play around with. Maybe extend Santiago a one-year deal just because you need some depth, you need options. But I don't think I'd put him in pen in the rotation. He'd be one of the guys competing for a rotation spot if I was running spring training. Is he going to be overpaid? Maybe you could argue that, yeah. But, like, it's all relative, right? He's overpaid, but if you have nowhere else to spend the money and you also need pitching, like, what are you saving the money for by cutting him or by non-tendering him? I could see them going either way with it, but if I was them, I think I'd give him the 1-year tender, even though you might be taking a loss financially. Where else are they spending big bucks right now that would necessitate cutting him? If you're going to cut him and go spend big money on some other much better pitcher, whatever, fine, all right. We can have that conversation all day long. But like, if you're not going to spend money, like, why are you stripping down payroll even more than what it already is stripped? I'm not sure I agree with that approach entirely. Dan asks, and we're really running up on it. I got to run here, guys. More likely to be DH next year, Park or Vargas? Flip a coin. Hard to say. Let's see in spring training. MG Stein, I'd non-tender Santiago. We talked about that maybe. Nick asks, we should bring back Jamie Carroll. It's exactly what the Twins need. I think he's being facetious, unless you're talking about in a front office role like what the Twins just filled those other guys, then maybe. Maybe Jamie Carroll's the sort of consummate pro they'll need. My guy Lubo asks, more excited about the Twins 2017 or Soundset 2017? Good question. I haven't seen the lineup yet. You'll have to send me that. I'm curious to see who's out there this year. Send Chance, please. Chance, perform at Soundset. I will go. MG Stein says, who cares about 2017? Okay, thanks for chiming in. Matt O'Connell, what's the next move the Twins make? Let's see at the winter meetings. This could get very interesting. We could turn up the heat on these conversations. Brent asks, is Gibson always going to be a 500 pitcher? Can he win 16 or 17? So much of that depends on run support. I could see Kyle Gibson taking a step forward, but I don't rate pitchers based on wins. I try to go innings, strikeouts, ERA, things like that they can more control. There's some advanced stuff that you pay attention to, more like fielding, independent pitching, and xFIP and stuff like that. But Gibson can be a good back-end starter. We'll see if he develops into that this upcoming year. There's no question for their starters to be better. He's got to bounce back. Sorry, I wish I could get to more. I got to run up and go on the radio. But thanks for coming to this edition of Tuesday Morning Coffee Q&A. Let's carry this over. Go to my Facebook page, Derek Wetmore MLB. I'll answer some more questions there. Thanks, guys. See ya.